Okay, now what we're going to do is continue to set up the materials and shaders for the rest of the objects in this scene and well, get this thing done. So let's wrap this up. We need to create a few more materials here. Now, we created a material for the ceramic tiles, but we didn't create one for the grout that goes in the middle here, in between, right there. Kind of like the grout right there, it's going to just connect all these tiles together. Okay, so let's take the fine china material. This is the closest one that looks like how it should look like. I'm going to duplicate that, and I'm going to rename this material to grout matte. And we're going to make a few changes. Let me select that grout again. It's being a little bit problematic to select. Should probably get in closer. Okay, there we go. I'm going to right click and assign that to the selection. Okay. Do a little render region there. Okay, so there's the grout. It's kind of this white type material. Now obviously some of these settings for it have to be changed because it shouldn't look reflective or anything like that. And you can see it's reflecting something here, which is obviously not what I want. So let me give it some roughness. So let me increase the roughness a little bit. Okay, let me go. What's killing this is the reflectivity. This should not be reflective at all. So we'll take the reflectivity all the way down so it's off, which means we don't have to worry about any of this stuff down here. I'm going to tell it to conserve energy, of course. I need it to do that. Although we aren't using any reflectivity, so it really isn't making a difference. Ambient occlusion. Let's go ahead and leave that off. Optimization, we really don't need any optimization. We're not reflecting anything. And additional options, we really don't have anything to change here. So I'm just going to leave it like that. Now let's create a new material. We need a new material for, say, the wine bottle, of course. So let's see which material we can reuse for the wine bottle. Let's use the wine glass. Duplicate, rename to, you probably guessed it, wine bottle matte. There we go. Now we have to do is assign it to the wine bottle. So here's our wine bottle. Select the wine bottle. Let's take the wine bottle material and assign it to selection. And now that's going to look like the wine glass, which is not what we want. So let's change that. First of all, let's change the illumination settings. The color, we're going to make a sort of dark green. So let's go with, I have my RGB values here. So let's go with 1.8 and 0.29 and 0.1. There we go. Now we get this nice kind of forest green color. Weight and roughness we'll leave alone. It's perfect the way it is. In terms of transparency and reflection, I don't want it to be transparent at all. Index of refraction, let's put that to 1.7. Let's also, the reflectivity, let's make it completely reflective. And this is going to be a very reflective surface. And energy conservation. Now, this again is another judgment call on our part. We can either have it like this, and let's go ahead and middle mouse button click on this little square right there, rectangle, so we can save that image. Now let's turn off energy conservation, turn default IOF back on. Okay, so let's grab the middle of the render region here. We can see this is before with energy conservation on, and this is after with it off. Not much of a difference except that it's a little bit brighter, just a tad, with the energy conservation off. I actually like it a little bit brighter. So what I'm going to do is leave energy conservation off for this specific circumstance. Again, it's a judgment call, and it's really up to you to do what you want, or up to your client. since they're usually the ones paying. Okay, and in additional options and optimization, I'm going to leave all that stuff off or whatnot. Let me turn off visible area light highlights. It's not having much of an effect. We really don't have, actually no, we don't have any area lights here, except for the ones outside. So it's not really going to have much of an effect, if at all. Okay, let's set up the material for the cap that goes on the top of the wine bottle. So we have to do that now. I'm going to duplicate the wine bottle material, rename it to wine cap matte, and now let's change some of these settings around. Okay, I'm going to make it, first of all, I'm going to not make it green. I'm going to make it kind of dark, a little bit dark. And in terms of weight, I'll leave at 1. Roughness, I'll leave at 0. Transparency and reflection, I'm gonna, obviously it's not transparent. Reflectivity, I want it to have very little reflectivity. So let's just knock this down to a very small amount. Something like 0.04 is good enough. In terms of glossiness, no, we don't want glossiness. Although it could actually help. That would be interesting. Let's just leave the glossiness off or set to 1 just to see what we get. Default IOF. Let me go ahead and turn that off. I'm going to turn on conserve energy. Index of refraction, let me put that back down to 1.4. And indirect illumination, nothing there. Ambient occlusion, let's leave that off. Optimization, I don't have any optimization, and yeah, that probably shouldn't. Okay. Okay, so here's our wine cap material. So let's apply it to the wine cap. Select the wine cap, right click and assign to selection. And there we go. Okay, so the wine cap is done. So let's do a render region of this, see what else needs to have materials assigned to it. Okay, the other thing that needs materials assigned to it is the walls. The walls need material assigned to it. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's take the floor material and we're going to duplicate that one and let's rename it. We're going to call this one, obviously, we're going to call this one outside bench by the tree mat. Well, what's wrong with that? Oh, right, that obviously doesn't make any sense. Let's call it walls mat. I think that would make more sense. Okay, so now let's go over here to illumination and change a few things around. Now this is where we can do something a little bit more interesting. Let's go ahead and adjust these settings here. Let's make the walls pure white. I don't want them to be peach or salmon or anything like that. Weight and roughness at 0.5 is perfectly fine. That's going to work out just fine. Transparency and reflection, no transparency. I don't want the walls to be reflective at all because they're going to look really weird. Honestly, I don't think I've ever seen walls that are reflective except for marble walls, which we couldn't afford for this scene, so we had to go with this plaster from our local hardware store. Okay, let's turn on default IOF. We'll be fine. We wanted to conserve energy. Okay, ambient occlusion. We want ambient occlusion on. These are the settings from the floor material, so we're going to keep these settings. Okay, so this looks fine. Optimization. What kind of optimization do we have here? Now, transparency and reflection we have off. Optimization's coming over from the floor material. Well, we don't need this because we're not having any type of reflections, so we'll turn all that stuff off. Okay. Additional options, we really don't have any additional options to tweak, so let's turn that off. I'm going to do something a little bit different here. Now, let me first of all go ahead and assign the wall material to the walls. Do a render region. That's what we get. Now I turned on the ambient occlusion for this, which helps, to help the effect of the lighting look a little bit better, but obviously it's not helping enough. So the ambient affection, the ambient occlusion effect in the architectural material is limited to some degree. Now, when we run into a situation like that where we want a stronger ambient occlusion effect, it's really easy, what we can do in terms of our options. Let's take the wall material here. Let's go to nodes. Let's grab ourselves an ambient occlusion node. And what I'm going to do is go and grab myself a mixer node. So I'll grab a mix two colors node. I'll plug this into the surface, shadows, and photon ports. Hold down shift while you do that to make things easier for you. And I'll plug in the architectural material to the base color of the mixer node and the ambient occlusion to the color 1 port of the mixer node. Let's open up the mixer node's property page and change the weight to pure white and the mix mode to multiply. And let's take the ambient occlusion node and let me see what changes I'm going to have to make here. The maximum distance I want to be about 1.5, and everything else I'm going to leave alone. Yes, I'm going to leave all that stuff alone. Okay, so what this is going to do, it's going to composite a stronger ambient occlusion effect on top of the shader for the walls to give us a more interesting result. So it's a way of going in there and adding to the architectural shader, and say if we're not too happy with the way that it's looking, we can go ahead and add some more ambient occlusion. So now we get this kind of darkness along the walls right there where the contact shadows are supposed to be. Looks pretty bad right now. Let's increase our anti-aliasing. It's going to take a little bit longer to render. There we go. The magic of video editing. You don't have to sit there and watch this render, but I do. Anyway, here's the added ambient occlusion effect that we added by compositing. If we go to our material manager here, we composited an ambient occlusion node using the mix two colors on top of the architectural material and plugged that right into the material node itself. So it gives us a stronger ambient occlusion effect, which is a good thing in this case. So I'm going to knock the anti-aliasing back down, cancel out that render region. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the windows here. So there's the windows. And I'm going to, let me come in here. I'm going to apply the walls material to those windows. Okay, so now the windows have that material. Now we have these window background objects like this one here, and we have another one outside of this window right there. So what are those for and how do we use them? Well, I'm going to show you that right now. If we do a render region of this, the walls look better, the floor is looking better, everything's looking better. It's not totally blown out and crazy, but the outside of the window doesn't look too good. So all we need to do is place a background image. So I'll click here to select the windows, because there's actually a plane, a 2D grid that's placed outside the windows, almost like a big old piece of cardboard that someone stuck on the outside of the window, and it's facing towards us. So let's open up the material manager here, and we're going to create a window background material. So we're going to go up to create, and we're going to use the constant shader, which is the one that's going to allow us to do this. We're not going to use an architectural shader because it's not good for this type of a situation. We're going to use this constant material. Let's open up the constant shader here, and we're going to go to the color input, and we're going to go to image. Now we're going to go to new and new from file. Where you want to go to the architectural directory. First of all, you want to go to the pictures folder inside of the project directory, which is right here. And inside pictures, you'll see a folder for architectural. Go ahead and open that folder, and then go into textures. And in textures, you're going to see a couple of images. So let's grab the first image here, hit OK, and this is the first image, and it's basically just a photograph of a background of real life. And that's what I was talking about earlier with architectural artists, how they use those to quickly create backgrounds for the outside whenever they're doing an interior scene. Okay? Now, what I'm going to do is, with that background selected, I'm going to right click and assign to selection. I'm going to also rename this material because it shouldn't be called constant. Let's call it window BG, which is short for background 1 matte, because we're going to have two different materials for this, because we don't want to have the same picture on both windows, because that obviously would look very, very strange, like something right out of the Twilight Zone, and that's not what we want. So now let's do a render preview. Now we can see there's an image in the background. Uh-oh, there's a problem though. The image doesn't look too realistic because it looks too dark. You can really tell that it looks like someone painted a piece of cardboard and just stuck it in front of the window there. So it's not very convincing at this point. So we need to change that. And the way we could change that is actually pretty easy. Let's close that. We don't need it anymore. Let's grab our constant shader material here, and we're going to use a mixer node to change the way that this looks. So let's go to nodes. Let's go down to mixers, mix two colors. We're going to plug the constant material into the base color here of the mixer, and we're going to take the mixer and plug it into the surface, shadow, and photon ports of this material here. Now, what are we going to plug as the color 1 for the mixer? We're going to plug in the same exact thing. That's right. We're going to take the constant and plug it into the color 1. And now we have the same thing being plugged twice and being composited on its own. So what we're going to do is change the mixing mode from mix to add. This way it makes it brighter. And we're going to change the color values here to something darker. Hold down Control while you click on these sliders so they all move uniform, or else you're forced to have to control sliders one by one, which in this case is not what we want. So let's get this down to about 0.2. Doesn't have to be exactly 0.2. Get it as close as you can right there. Okay, so now this becomes brighter. So now let's do a render preview and see what the difference is. Aha! Now it looks brighter. Now it looks more like a landscape would, and that looks obviously much more realistic. Now it looks more natural, like that isn't an image and it's an actual background. Even though you and I know it's an image. Just don't tell anybody. Okay, now we're going to do the same thing for the other background here, because if we do a render region, this background grid here doesn't have anything, a material to it. So it's very easy. Just right click and duplicate this material, rename it for organization's sake, and just rename it from 1 to 2. So this is window background 2. And then we'll go to image here, and we'll go new from file, and we'll plug in the other image that we had over here, which is an image of sort of the same area, but it's a different angle. So it stays consistent, but it's different enough to the point where nobody's going to point and go, hey, wait a minute, that's the same picture. It's a totally different picture, but it's of the same area, so it'll look much better. Now, this came out white like this because we forgot to ask pretty please when we rendered. Actually, no, that's not the case. It's my fault. I forgot to add the material. So we'll select Window BG2, and we'll go over here to Window BG2 Material and assign to selection. See how easy things are when you name them appropriately? Now let's do a preview render, and we should get the correct render, and we do. There's the image, nice and bright. It looks correct and more natural. Okay, so let's close that. There we go. We have that shader done. If we do a preview render of the entire scene here, we should have a complete scene with all the materials and shaders correctly applied. Okay, perfect. Good to go. Now if we come over here, we can do a render of, say, this. Let's see what this looks like close up. Okay, wine bottle's looking great. Wine glasses looking fantastic. There's our background, window, lighting, walls look fine, ceiling looks fine. The ceramic tiles look great, very realistic, and the little teapot is there just staring at us with its two little highlight eyes and a little nose, saying thank you for watching this tutorial. Well, thanks again for watching this tutorial and for supporting i3D. We're not done just yet. We still have another interesting project coming up. It's going to be a nice little treat, and we'll get into that next. As for this, that does it for this little project here. I'll see you in the next one.